Hello there and welcome. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Maybe the day felt long, or maybe your mind is still moving a little too quickly, like wind skipping across open water. If that's the case, then this journey may be exactly what you need. Tonight, we're drifting out toward the oldest blue on Earth, toward the quiet breathing edge of the world, toward the sea and the vast, patient oceans that hold so much of our planet in their gentle, salt-filled hands. There is something about the ocean that can soften a person. Even in memory, even in imagination, it has a way of slowing the heart. Perhaps it's the rhythm of tides arriving and retreating without hurry. Perhaps it's the horizon, that calm line where certainty gives way to wonder. Or perhaps it's simply the feeling that the sea has been here long before us, moving beneath moonlight, carrying clouds, shaping shores, whispering to cliffs, and rocking life itself in a cradle of currents. However you arrived here tonight, you can simply listen and rest. So let yourself settle in, adjust your pillow if you need to. Let your shoulders drop just a little. Unclench your jaw, breathe in slowly and then breathe out as though you are letting a wave slide back into the dark. There's no rush. You're doing great. There's nothing to do now except be here. Tonight's journey is not about racing through facts or collecting information like shells in a bucket. It's more like floating. We'll drift from moonlit tides to coral gardens, from plankton too tiny to see to whales so large they can seem almost mythic. We'll travel over kelp forests that sway like underwater cathedrals, across bright shallows and deep midnight waters, down to volcanic ridges, and into places where living creatures make their own light. We'll move slowly, calmly, and with plenty of room to breathe. The beautiful thing about the sea is that it can be both familiar and mysterious at once. You may already know the feeling of salt on your skin, the hush of foam on sand, the cold surprise of a wave brushing your ankles. But beyond every beach lies a world so layered and spacious that it can still feel dreamlike, even after centuries of careful study and quiet observation. The oceans cover most of our planet, and because of that, they do not simply sit beside our lives. They shape them. They help carry heat around the globe, feed clouds that become rain, cradle countless forms of life, and even contribute to the breath you are taking right now. And still tonight, we won't approach any of this with strain. We'll approach it the way moonlight approaches the water, softly, indirectly enough to reveal just a shimmer. If some details drift past you, that's perfectly fine. In fact, that may be the point. This is a place for half listening and slow wonder, a place where facts can wash over you like small, even waves, a place where science becomes a kind of lullaby. If you enjoy relaxing journeys like this, you may want to subscribe, or leave a gentle like, or simply return another night when you need a calm place to land. But for now, the most important thing is to get comfortable. Settle in as though you are being tucked into a quiet cabin beside the shore, with the window slightly open and the night sea breathing just beyond it. As we begin, imagine the world from far above. A dark planet turning slowly beneath the stars, wrapped not mainly in land but in water. Broad belts of blue, silvered by moonlight. Cloud shadows drifting over open ocean. Swells rising and falling across distances so vast they can humble the imagination. Somewhere on some coast, a tide is creeping inward over smooth stones. Somewhere else, a reef fish is settling into a hidden nook for the night. In deeper waters, a faint flicker appears and disappears as a living body makes a private lantern out of chemistry. Far below the surface, where sunlight never reaches, the planet is still moving, still warm in places, still making mountains in the dark. And perhaps the most comforting thing is this: the sea does not hurry. The ocean does not panic about what comes next. It moves in cycles, in breaths, in returns. Waves arrive, waves go, tides gather, tides loosen. Seasons of bloom and migration and quiet follow one another with ancient patience. Even its storms, though powerful, are part of larger rhythms that usually pass, giving way again to long intervals of hush. Tonight we'll stay mostly with that hush, with the gentler side of marine wonder, with the parts that invite the mind to widen and then soften. If your thoughts wander, let them wander like driftwood. If sleep begins to come, let it come. If you stay awake for every word, that's lovely too. There's no test at the end of this, no task to complete. Only this long, slow current of story and science carrying you through moonlight, salt, depth, and quiet amazement. So now, as the room grows a little softer around you, let's step down to the shore in our minds. The sand is cool. The air tastes faintly of mineral salt. The horizon is a dark ribbon. The water ahead is never still, not completely, and yet it feels peaceful all the same. We are about to begin a long, unhurried voyage through some of the most relaxing facts about the sea and oceans to fall asleep to. Let yourself drift. Let the tide of attention loosen. And together, very gently, let's move out into the blue. The first soothing truth about the ocean is almost impossibly large. Most of our planet is covered by it. When you picture Earth from space, the impression is not of continents with a bit of water between them, but of water holding continents like scattered islands of stone. The oceans cover a little more than 70% of Earth's surface, which means that the dominant face of our world is blue. It is a comforting thought, in a way, that the planet is not mainly rock or road or wall, but wave. Even if you live far from the coast, your world is still an ocean world. The sea helps define the climate you live in, the clouds that pass overhead, the breath of weather itself. And because the average depth of the ocean stretches down for several kilometers, the amount of living space within it is immense, layered, and quietly astonishing. It is not just wide. It is deep in a way that invites humility. The sea gives Earth volume for wonder. And from that great scale comes another lovely fact. The ocean often appears blue because water tends to absorb the warmer red parts of sunlight more readily than the cooler blue. The remaining blue light can scatter back toward our eyes, especially where the water is clear. So the color many of us associate with calm vacations, painted postcards, and long exhalations is not only poetry. It is physics made beautiful. Of course, the sea can also look silver, green, gray, black, turquoise, milk blue, or nearly violet depending on sky, depth, sediment, life, and weather. But that classic blue, that great planet blue, is one of the signatures of Earth. It is a reminder that the world wears its water openly. Then there is the tide, perhaps the gentlest large-scale motion many people ever witness. Tides may seem like the sea simply deciding to come closer and then slip away again, but they are part of a grand celestial conversation. The moon's gravity plays the leading role, tugging on Earth's waters so that the oceans bulge slightly. The sun joins in too, not as strongly as the moon for tides, but enough to shape the pattern. As Earth turns, coastlines move through these watery bulges, and the sea level rises and falls in a slow rhythm that has guided shore life for ages. Most places experience 2 high tides and 2 low tides each lunar day, though local coastlines can make the pattern more complicated and more interesting. What matters for our sleepy purposes is that the sea is literally responding to the sky. Moonlight on water is lovely enough, but beneath that glow there is also a pull, a quiet choreography between ocean and orbit. And those tides are not perfectly timed to the clock we use in everyday life. A tidal cycle from one high tide to the next tends to take a little over 12 hours, and the moon's daily schedule shifts slightly too. That is why tides often arrive later each day, like a patient appointment that moves by about 50 minutes. It is such a soft rebellion against human scheduling. The sea keeps lunar time. It answers to both gravity and geography. In bays and estuaries, in harbors and inlets, the shape of the coastline may amplify the rise and fall or soften it into subtler motion. In some places, the tide creeps almost unnoticed over flats of gleaming sand, and in others it rushes through channels with eager energy. But always, underneath the details, there is that same reliable pulse. You can almost imagine the planet breathing in salt water. Waves, too, are calmer to think about once you realize what they mostly carry is energy, not individual parcels of water traveling all the way across an ocean. A wave can move through the sea much as a ripple moves through a field of grain in the wind. The water itself often rises and falls in place, tracing a kind of circular motion, while the wave form continues onward. This may be why watching waves can feel so hypnotic. They are movement without frantic relocation, action without chaos. Swells generated far away can cross enormous distances, arriving on a distant shore days later with the memory of some old wind still folded inside them. The beach receives news from beyond the horizon in repeating lines of foam. And when those waves finally meet the land, coastlines begin to tell their own slow stories. Beaches are not fixed borders. They are living edges, rearranged by tide, current, storm, season, and sand. One day a shore may be steep and pebbled, another day broad and smooth. Dunes may shift a little. Driftwood may gather and then vanish. Tiny shells may appear where none were seen before. The ocean is always editing the margin between sea and land, but usually with patient hands. To walk a beach at low tide is to see a page the water has just rewritten. To return later and find it changed again is to remember that stillness and motion can exist together. The sea is always moving, and yet somehow it still invites rest. Let yourself drift with that. There's no rush. The tide has all night. One of the ocean's quieter marvels is its salt. Seawater is not just water with a pinch of flavor. It carries dissolved minerals gathered over immense spans of time, washed from rocks by rain and rivers, released from the seafloor, cycled by life, concentrated by evaporation. The dominant taste is familiar sodium chloride, but the sea is a more intricate mineral broth than any single kitchen word can capture. On average, seawater holds about 35 parts salt for every 1,000 parts water, though that amount can vary. Near river mouths it may be fresher. In hot, enclosed seas where evaporation is strong, it may grow saltier. In places where ice melts or rain falls heavily, the balance shifts again. This changing salinity matters because salt subtly alters the weight of water itself. Salty water tends to be denser than fresher water, and in the ocean, small differences in density can help guide whole rivers of current through the deep. Temperature joins salinity in this hidden dance. Warm water often stays nearer the surface because it is lighter, while cold, saltier water may sink. In many places, the ocean arranges itself in layers, not like perfectly stacked sheets, but like soft zones with boundaries that can shift and blur. Near the top is the sunlit layer, warmed by day, stirred by wind, lively with exchange. Beneath it, a region may appear where temperature drops more quickly, a kind of underwater slope in warmth. Deeper still, the water can become cold and remarkably stable. It is a strange and lovely thought that the sea has weather on the surface and patience below. What looks from shore like a single body is, in fact, a layered world with its own interior architecture. Let yourself imagine sinking through it slowly, not as a person, but as awareness, moving from brightness to cool dimness, from the chatter of waves to the hush of depth. That bright surface layer, where sunlight can still reach, is especially important because it hosts a drifting multitude so tiny that much of it remains invisible to the naked eye. These are the plankton, a word for organisms that drift more than they swim against currents. Some are animal plankton, some are bacteria, and some are plant-like photosynthesizers called phytoplankton. Though they are small, they are among the most influential beings on the planet. Phytoplankton float in the upper ocean where light is available, and there they use sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to make food, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. In many regions of the world, the sea's upper layer is like a vast, invisible meadow, not of grass, but of microscopic life turning light into breath. It is often said, and with good reason, that a large share of the oxygen available in Earth's atmosphere has been produced by the ocean over time, especially by marine photosynthesizers such as phytoplankton. The exact proportion can shift with how it is measured, but it is fair to say that the sea contributes enormously to the breathable character of our world. So there is a peaceful intimacy in realizing that each slow breath you take tonight is connected, however distantly, to sunlight falling on water. Some of the oxygen in the room around you may trace its history to a bloom of tiny drifting cells in a sunlit patch of sea. You are doing great. Breathe in, breathe out. Even here, far from any shore perhaps, the ocean is quietly involved. Plankton are also the beginning of many marine food webs. Tiny grazers feed on phytoplankton. Small fish feed on them. Larger fish, seabirds, jellyfish, whales, and countless others join the chain in one way or another. Sometimes plankton gather in blooms visible from above as swirling veils of green or milky turquoise. These blooms can come and go with the seasons, with temperature, with light, with the arrival of nutrients. And this brings us to another soothing ocean truth. Some of the richest waters on Earth are fed not from rivers or forests, but from the deep itself. In certain places, winds and currents help lift deeper, nutrient-rich water toward the surface in a process called upwelling. It is as though the ocean remembers to feed its own surface garden by bringing hidden nourishment up from below. Where upwelling happens, the sea can become especially fertile. Fish may gather there. Seabirds may wheel overhead. Whales may arrive to feed in waters that seem suddenly alive with possibility. Yet all of this abundance begins with a simple physical movement of water rising, carrying with it the ingredients for life. It is a beautiful lesson in quiet support. The deep nourishes the light. The unseen feeds the visible. And throughout it all, the ocean remains in motion, not hurriedly but continuously, circulating heat, salt, nutrients, and breath around the globe. Let yourself drift with that thought for a moment. The sea is not only scenery. It is metabolism on a planetary scale, and it hums beneath life with a calm, enduring generosity. Before we go any farther, let's pause here for a moment on an imaginary shoreline. The facts can wait. The tide is in no hurry, and neither are we. Take a slower breath now if that feels comfortable. In through the nose gently, out again unforced as though the sea itself were breathing beside you. If your mind is still busy, let it be busy in the background like gulls far down the coast. It doesn't need to go silent all at once. It can simply grow more distant. Picture the dark water under moonlight. Not bright, not dramatic, just softly silvered at the edges. A small wave lifts, folds, and fades. Another follows. The horizon stays where it has always been, patient and untroubled. There's something deeply reassuring about rhythms larger than our own thoughts. Tides rise, tides fall, plankton drift, currents turn. Night moves slowly over the sea. You're doing great. There's no rush. Let your body feel a little heavier, as though it were being gently anchored by sand beneath the blankets. Let your thoughts float a little farther apart like boats in a calm harbor. You can simply listen and rest. There's nothing to do now except be here, beside this great imagined water, carried onward by its hush. If the open ocean can feel like a vast blue dream, coral reefs may feel like its bright, intricate jewelry. And yet reefs are built by animals so small that one coral polyp, on its own, might seem almost modest. These soft-bodied creatures live in colonies, and over time, many kinds of coral secrete hard limestone skeletons that remain after the living tissue has grown upward or moved on. Layer upon layer, generation upon generation, these structures can accumulate into reefs of remarkable beauty and complexity. It is one of the gentlest, astonishing facts in the sea. Tiny animals, working collectively over long stretches of time, can build formations large enough to be seen from the sky. The ocean often reminds us that greatness does not always arrive in a rush. Sometimes it grows by patient repetition in warm, clear water. Although coral reefs occupy only a small fraction of the ocean floor, they support an extraordinary share of marine biodiversity. They are often compared to rainforests for this reason, but reefs have their own kind of crowded brilliance. Crevices, ledges, arches, sand patches, waving soft corals, branching corals, massive boulder-like corals, sponges, sea stars, mollusks, shrimps, grazers, hunters, cleaners, drifters, hiders, glowings, grazings, spawnings, and songs of snapping life fill these places with layered activity. Yet from above, a reef lagoon can still look perfectly calm, as if nothing much is happening below. This contrast is part of the charm. The sea often hides abundance beneath tranquility. Under a surface of glass, an entire city may be breathing. Corals themselves often live in partnership with tiny photosynthetic algae tucked within their tissues. The algae receive shelter and compounds they can use, while the coral receives energy-rich products of photosynthesis. This symbiosis helps many reef-building corals flourish in sunlit waters that can seem, at first glance, too clear and low in nutrients to support such extravagance. Sunlight, chemistry, and cooperation combine to make architecture. It is one more ocean lesson in relationships. Very little in the sea exists alone for long. Life there tends to entwine, exchange, shelter, nibble, polish, warn, and support. Even the bright colors of reefs can be part of this web, signals and disguises and invitations woven together. Among reef dwellers, balance is often maintained by creatures doing their quiet jobs. Herbivorous fish and invertebrates graze on algae, keeping it from overgrowing the corals. Predatory fish help regulate populations lower in the chain. Cleaner fish and cleaner shrimp may set up little stations where larger animals pause to have parasites picked away, a scene that can feel almost impossibly civilized under the sea. Some fish cue. Some flare their fins or open their mouths, allowing the tiny cleaners to work. In the hush of reef water, even maintenance becomes a kind of ritual. And as sand drifts through channels or settles on the bottom, other animals stir, sift, and recycle the reef's leftovers. Nothing much is wasted in these bright, busy gardens. Not all coastal nurseries are made of coral. Mangrove forests, with their arching roots and salt-tolerant leaves, line sheltered tropical shores in many parts of the world. They stand where land and sea negotiate, roots partly above water, partly below, creating a lattice of refuge for young fish, crabs, mollusks, and many other creatures. The roots help slow water and trap sediment, and the trees can soften wave energy along the coast. At high tide, the sea threads through them. At low tide, mud glistens beneath. To look into a mangrove tangle is to see complexity made into shelter. What may seem from a distance like a fringe of trees is, up close, a layered habitat full of hidden life and nursery quiet. Nearby, in shallower clear waters, seagrass meadows may spread like underwater prairies. Unlike seaweed, seagrasses are flowering plants, complete with roots, leaves, and the ancient botanical story of plants that long ago returned to the sea. Their waving blades provide food and cover for many animals, from tiny invertebrates to sea turtles in some places. They also help stabilize sediments and can store impressive amounts of carbon in their roots and in the mud beneath them, where low oxygen conditions may slow decay. It is a soft, useful kind of magic, a meadow under salt water, breathing, trapping, sheltering, holding memory in the soil. Coral reefs, mangroves, and seagrass beds often occur near one another like neighboring chapters of the same coastal story, each one supporting life in its own way, each one moving gently with tide and light. Let yourself drift through them, as though through rooms of a blue house. Farther along cool, nutrient-rich coasts, another underwater forest rises, this one not from flowering plants or reef stone, but from giant brown algae called kelp. Some kelp species can grow astonishingly quickly under the right conditions, stretching upward through the water column in long ribbons that sway with each passing surge. Their holdfasts grip rock below, their fronds reach toward light above, and between those 2 points they create vertical worlds of shadow, shelter, and movement. To drift through a kelp forest in imagination is to enter a green cathedral where sunlight filters down in shifting shafts, and the whole structure bends without breaking. It is one of the sea's most elegant examples of strength expressed through flexibility. Kelp does not resist every motion. It yields, and in that yielding it survives. Kelp forests support rich communities. Fish rest among the blades. Invertebrates cling to the lower structures. Seals and sea lions may weave through the stems. Some birds forage along the edges. And among the most beloved inhabitants are sea otters, who often float on the surface, wrapping themselves in kelp so they do not drift away while resting. There is something especially soothing about that image, an animal using a living ribbon of sea growth as a nighttime anchor. Otters also play an important ecological role in many kelp ecosystems because they prey on sea urchins, which can otherwise multiply and graze kelp holdfasts heavily. In places where this balance remains intact, forests may flourish more fully. The sea, again, is a story of relationships. A drifting mammal, a spiny grazer, a rooted algae forest, and the shape of an entire habitat connected by appetite and rest. At river mouths and sheltered coasts, estuaries form where freshwater and seawater mingle. These are not just in-between places. They are dynamic worlds of changing salinity, silty light, tidal breathing, and high productivity. Here the water may taste less salty than the open sea, and the tides move through channels and marshes with a slow insistence that can transform the landscape twice a day. Juvenile fish often find estuaries to be gentle training grounds, rich in food and relatively protected from the wider ocean. Birds gather. Marsh grasses root into mud. Crabs scuttle. The whole place feels transitional but not uncertain. It is a place of mixing, and because of that it can be especially alive. Salt marshes, which often border temperate estuaries, are another quiet marvel. They may not always look dramatic from afar, especially compared with cliffs or surf, but they are among the coast's great working landscapes. Tides fill and drain their channels. Salt-tolerant grasses spread and trap sediment. Mud stores organic matter. Countless small animals find shelter there. The marsh can soften storm energy, filter water, and provide habitat that seems humble until you kneel close and notice the intricate network of stems, burrows, and shimmering shallow pools. Sleepy science often lives in places like this, places easy to overlook, where extraordinary usefulness wears the plain clothes of grass and mud and tide. Many ocean animals are also travelers on a scale that can calm the imagination by enlarging it. Sea turtles, for example, may hatch on a sandy shore, disappear into the ocean for years, and later return, often to the same region where their lives began. The details can vary by species, and the exact mechanisms are still being teased apart, but it seems likely that magnetic fields, currents, chemistry, and celestial cues all play roles in these long navigations. There is something beautiful about a creature crossing an open ocean with no map we would recognize, guided by senses tuned to a planet-sized compass. The sea remembers pathways we cannot see. And turtles are far from alone. Many animals migrate through the oceans over astounding distances. Whales move between feeding and breeding grounds. Some fish cross entire basins. Seabirds trace loops over salt water that can span hemispheres. Even tiny drifting organisms may rise and sink daily through the water column in synchronized motion. The ocean is full of roots, some seasonal, some nightly, some ancestral beyond our easy understanding. If you listen closely, the sea can begin to feel less like emptiness and more like a slow-moving highway of lives in motion. Yet at bedtime, these migrations do not need to feel urgent. They can be imagined as processions beneath moonlight, long and sure, each creature carried by current, instinct, and the faithful shape of the world. We've moved through reefs, mangroves, meadows, kelp, marshes, and estuaries, and now it may feel nice to pause again. Imagine sitting on a weathered piece of driftwood above the tide line, wrapped in a blanket, listening to small waves fold over themselves in the dark. You don't need to hold on to every detail. Let the facts loosen and settle like sand sinking through clear water. Maybe one image remains with you more than the others. Kelp forests lifting and bowing, coral built by tiny animals, mangrove roots making shelter in the tide. That is enough, more than enough. Take another easy breath, in and out. Let your body be heavy. Let your mind be wide. The sea has room for both. If a thought comes, let it pass like foam. If a feeling comes, let it rise and fall like the tide. You can simply listen and rest. There's no rush. You're doing great. The horizon is still there, dark and steady. Somewhere beyond it, currents are turning. Whales are traveling and moonlight is touching water you will never see. And still in this moment, everything can feel close and gentle, as if the whole ocean had leaned in only to whisper, "Sleep now, sleep slowly." One of the more surprising truths about the sea is that sound travels through it very well, often much faster than through air. In seawater, the closeness of the molecules allows vibrations to move efficiently, and this means the ocean is, in many ways, an acoustic world. Light fades quickly with depth, but sound can linger, bend, and carry. For marine animals, especially those living far below the surface or across wide open water, hearing and producing sound may be more useful than vision over long distances. The sea, then, is not silent at all. It is full of clicks, pulses, songs, scrapes, crackles, and low rumbles. Some come from waves and bubbles, some from ice, some from volcanic or shifting earth, and many from life itself. A listener dropped into the underwater dark would not find emptiness, but a hidden orchestra. Because temperature and pressure change with depth, sound in the ocean may bend in interesting ways. In some regions there is a depth at which sound can become trapped and guided, refracting up and down within a natural channel. This allows certain low-frequency sounds to travel remarkably far, sometimes across vast distances. It is a lovely thought that the sea contains pathways not only for currents and migrations but for voices. The ocean can act like a cathedral of water, carrying songs long after their maker has moved on. A whale may call, and far away another may hear, the message preserved in pressure and salt. Whales themselves belong naturally in such a world of carried sound. Some species sing elaborate phrases that repeat and evolve over time, while others produce pulses, groans, moans, or calls suited to their own needs. Humpback songs are famous for their haunting beauty, and blue whales, the largest animals known to have lived, often produce extremely low notes that can roll through the sea like distant thunder softened into velvet. A blue whale may be longer than many rooms are wide, yet it feeds primarily on tiny krill, straining immense mouthfuls of seawater through baleen to capture these small crustaceans. There is something wonderfully dreamlike about such scale, the largest body nourished by countless tiny lives. In summer feeding seasons, some individuals may consume astonishing amounts, gathering energy from blooms of abundance in cold, productive waters. Blue whales also tend to migrate, often spending part of the year in richer feeding grounds and part in warmer regions associated with breeding and calving. Their routes are not always simple, and different populations may follow different patterns, but the overall rhythm is one of grand seasonal movement. The ocean receives these immense travelers year after year, like a road without pavement and without end. If you imagine a blue whale at night, just below the surface, exhaling a plume into cold moonlit air before slipping back down, the scale of the sea becomes easier to feel. It is a place large enough for giants, and gentle enough at times to hide them almost completely. Not all important ocean journeys are made by giants. In fact, one of the largest migrations on Earth happens every day and night in the sea, performed by multitudes of much smaller animals. Zooplankton, lanternfish, and other creatures often rise toward shallower waters after dark to feed, then sink again by day toward deeper safety. This vertical migration can involve huge numbers of animals moving together through the water column, like a living tide responding not to the moon this time, but to light. Night in the ocean is not only sleep, it is also ascent, feeding, and return. Lanternfish, despite their modest size, are thought to make up a large part of the deep ocean's fish biomass in many places. Many have tiny light-producing organs, and their nightly rise toward food-rich upper layers is part of the great pulse of the sea. The open water between surface and depth, which might seem empty to us, is often full of this hidden traffic. Creatures move up and down like breathing, linking dark layers with bright ones, carrying energy through the ocean in their bodies. You can simply listen and rest with that image. The sea is full of travelers, from giants singing in the deep to small glowing fish climbing the night. If you were to sink slowly down through clear open ocean, sunlight would not vanish all at once. It would soften by degrees. The uppermost layer, where enough light reaches for strong photosynthesis, is often called the sunlit zone. Here the surface may glitter, fish may flash silver, and drifting phytoplankton turn radiance into living matter. But below that bright region, the blue begins to dim. Colors fade in a particular order, with reds disappearing early, and the world becomes increasingly monochrome. Around a few hundred meters down, in many places, you enter the twilight zone, where there is still some faint light from above but not enough for most photosynthesis. It is a realm of dusk that never becomes day, a permanent evening inside the sea. This twilight region is vast, and because the ocean is so deep over so much of the planet, These dim waters make up an enormous part of Earth's living space. Creatures here may have large eyes to gather scarce light, or mirrored sides, or dark bodies that all but vanish. Many participate in those nightly vertical migrations, rising after sunset and descending again before dawn. If the surface ocean is like an illuminated city, the twilight zone may be more like a long corridor between worlds, busy at certain hours, shadowed at others, always half hidden. And below it lies greater darkness still, where sunlight no longer reaches at all. Pressure increases steadily as you go deeper, and this is one of the great shaping forces of the ocean. With roughly every 10 meters of descent, the weight pressing down grows. In the deep sea, the pressure can become immense by human standards, yet life has evolved there again and again, not despite the pressure but within it, fitted to that squeeze from the start. Deep-sea animals are not being crushed in the dramatic way imagination might suggest. Rather, their bodies are adapted to a world where pressure is simply normal. It is a tender reminder that every environment creates its own version of home. What would seem unthinkable to one creature may be ordinary to another. Food in the deep often arrives from above in a steady drift, sometimes called marine snow. This is not snow in the cold, wintry sense, but a slow fall of organic particles, bits of dead plankton, fecal pellets, mucus, scraps of plant and animal matter, and the occasional larger body sinking through the water. For deep communities, this downward shower can be a crucial food source. Imagine a black sky made of water and through it, a constant fine descent of nourishment. The deep sea is not empty darkness, but a place connected to the surface by a rain of life. Even far below, the upper ocean is still giving. Because there is so little sunlight in the deep, many animals make their own light. Bioluminescence is widespread in marine life, especially below the sunlit zone, and it can be used in many ways: to attract prey, confuse predators, communicate, find mates, or disappear. Some animals flash suddenly. Others glow in points or bars or lures. Some release luminous clouds. Some host light-producing bacteria. A fish with lantern-like organs, a jelly shimmering faintly, a siphonophore trailing blue sparks in the black water. All of it feels less like ordinary biology and more like stars learning to swim. One especially elegant use of bioluminescence is counter-illumination. In this strategy, an animal glows softly on its underside to match the faint light filtering from above, making its silhouette harder to detect from below. It is camouflage made of light instead of shadow, a trick of balance rather than concealment alone. The sea often rewards subtlety like this. Not every survival strategy is tooth or speed. Some are quiet acts of matching, blending, and becoming just enough like the world around you that danger passes by. Let yourself drift into that darkness for a moment, where creatures bloom briefly with blue-green fire and then disappear, as though the ocean were dreaming in tiny lights. Now the water around us has grown darker in imagination, and perhaps your thoughts have too, but in a good way, in the soft way that evening darkens a room. Let's pause here, suspended somewhere between the surface and the deep. Feel the bed beneath you, or the chair, or wherever you are resting. Notice that you do not have to sink anywhere at all. You can stay exactly where you are and still wander. That is one of the gentlest things about bedtime listening. The journey happens without effort. Take a slow breath and imagine it glowing faintly like bioluminescence in dark water. In, a pale blue shimmer. Out, a long, easy fading. There's nothing to solve, nothing to remember perfectly, just sound, breath, and the hush of a wide, imagined ocean. Let yourself drift. You're doing great. Somewhere below, marine snow is falling. Somewhere above, moonlight is touching the waves. Between them, life rises and descends in silence. The sea keeps moving, but you can be still. The sea keeps breathing, and you can borrow its rhythm for a little while longer. In some of the deep ocean's darkest places, the seafloor opens and Earth's internal heat meets seawater in a remarkable exchange. Hydrothermal vents form where seawater seeps into cracks in the crust, becomes heated by underlying rock or magma, and rises again carrying dissolved minerals. To imagine this in the deep is to imagine a hidden landscape of chimneys and shimmering plumes, as if the planet itself were exhaling under pressure. These vents can be very hot in places, but the surrounding ocean remains cold, so the contrast creates an eerie beauty. Black water, mineral clouds, and life gathered around warmth in the immense dark. It feels almost like an underwater campfire for creatures that have never known sunlight. What makes vent communities especially extraordinary is that they do not depend directly on sunlight for their energy base. Instead of photosynthesis, microbes there often use chemosynthesis, drawing energy from chemical compounds in the vent fluids. These microbes form the foundation of an ecosystem powered by Earth's chemistry rather than the sun's rays. It is one of the ocean's most mind-widening facts. Life can build rich communities in total darkness, fueled not by daylight but by reactions among minerals and water. The sea keeps revealing that the living world is more inventive than we tend to assume. Around vents, unusual animals may thrive. Giant tube worms, for example, can grow surprisingly quickly in some vent systems. They lack a conventional mouth as adults, yet they host symbiotic bacteria inside their bodies, and those bacteria help provide nourishment. Vent mussels, shrimp, crabs, and other specialized organisms create communities that can look almost alien, though of course they are profoundly earthly, simply adapted to an earthly environment most of us never see. The deep sea teaches this again and again. The strange is often just the unfamiliar version of the possible. And while vents are dramatic local features, they sit within an even grander structure. The mid-ocean ridge system is the longest mountain range on Earth, though most of it lies hidden beneath the sea. It winds across the globe like the stitched seam of a baseball, a vast undersea chain of ridges where tectonic plates move apart and new ocean crust is formed. It is soothing to think that our planet is still quietly making itself under the water. Mountains are rising there not into alpine air, but into dark, cold sea, unknown to most eyes and yet fundamental to the shape of the world. As molten material rises and cools along these ridges, fresh seafloor is created in a slow process of spreading. Over immense timescales, this movement helps rearrange ocean basins and continents. The seafloor, then, is not an inert floor at all. It is dynamic, renewing in some places, sinking in others, all according to the deep choreography of plate tectonics. We tend to think of the land under our feet as the stable part of Earth, and the ocean as the restless part. But in geological time, even the seafloor is busy. The planet is still drafting itself in the dark. Some undersea mountains rise so high that their peaks approach the surface, or even break through it, becoming islands. Others remain submerged as seamounts, influencing currents, drawing life and creating oases in the open ocean. Water flowing around these features can bring nutrients upward or create local patterns that attract plankton, fish, and larger animals. So even underwater mountains that never see daylight may shape the lives above them. The ocean is full of hidden architecture affecting visible life. There's no rush as you take this in. Just let the picture widen. Chimneys in the dark, bacteria feeding whole communities, mountains spanning the planet under miles of water, and Earth remaking its skin in silence. If ridges are the ocean's hidden mountain ranges, trenches are their hidden valleys, though valley may sound far too gentle for such depth. Ocean trenches form where one tectonic plate bends beneath another, creating long, narrow depressions that can reach astonishing distances downward. The deepest of them descend farther below sea level than the tallest mountains rise above it. And yet, despite the scale, these trenches are not chaotic abysses in the imagination-only sense. They are real places, shaped by gravity, rock, pressure, sediment, and time. Even the deepest point in the ocean belongs not to fantasy, but to Earth. That may be one of the most calming things science can offer. The unknown is still part of home. The water in the deep ocean is often just a few degrees above freezing, and because little sunlight reaches those depths, temperature changes are slow and modest. Compared with the atmosphere, where warmth and cold can swing quickly, the deep sea can feel like a reservoir of steadiness. It is dark, cold, and pressurized, yes, but also stable in a way surface life rarely is. Over broad abyssal plains, the seafloor stretches out flatter than many people realize, covered in fine sediments that settle over time. These plains make up huge portions of the deep ocean floor and can seem almost featureless on a human scale, though closer inspection reveals tracks, burrows, sea cucumbers, worms, stars, and the patient business of life continuing on soft ground in near-total darkness. Not all deep-sea communities gather around hydrothermal heat. Some form around cold seeps, places where hydrocarbons and other fluids seep slowly from the seafloor. These areas can also support chemosynthetic microbes and the animals associated with them. The word cold here is relative, of course, but compared to hydrothermal vents, the seep fluids are far cooler. The deep ocean keeps offering variations on a theme, life finding chemical footholds where we once assumed almost nothing could happen. Instead of emptiness, there are neighborhoods. Instead of silence alone, there are subtle exchanges. The dark is more inhabited than it first appears. Far above these depths in polar seas, another important process begins at the surface when seawater freezes into sea ice. Unlike the ice in your freezer tray, sea ice forms from salt water, and as it freezes, much of the salt is left behind in the surrounding liquid. This makes the nearby water saltier and therefore denser, encouraging it to sink. That sinking helps drive some of the deep currents that connect the world ocean. A quiet act of freezing at the top can help set great underwater rivers in motion below. It is a beautiful chain of cause and effect, delicate in mechanism and enormous in consequence. Sea ice itself has a kind of subtle elegance. Because ice is less dense than liquid water, it floats, forming a shifting skin over polar seas. This floating cover can reflect sunlight, shelter water below from wind, and provide habitat for organisms from algae living in briny channels to larger animals that depend on the ice in seasonal ways. When the ice grows and retreats with the year, it changes light, temperature, and movement across entire regions. What seems like still white cover from a distance is, in fact, dynamic and full of consequence. And in the waters near ice edges, life can become especially rich during the return of sunlight, when blooms awaken and food webs respond. Polar seas may appear austere at first glance, but they can be intensely productive at certain times, supporting fish, seabirds, seals, and whales. Once again, the ocean teaches that beauty and abundance do not always wear bright colors. Sometimes they appear in silver light, cold air, floating ice, and the slow sinking of dense water into the world's deep circulatory system. Let yourself rest with that image. A pale polar horizon, quiet ice, dark water below, and a planet-sized current beginning in the hush. We've reached the cold edges now, the places of floating ice and deep beginning, so this is a good moment to slow down even more. Imagine the air here is very still. The sea is dark and glassy in places, fractured in others by pale ice. Nothing is loud. Even the world seems to be speaking in a whisper. If you like, picture your breath as a small cloud in the cold, then let that cloud dissolve. Breathe in slowly. Breathe out even more slowly. You're doing great. There is something deeply restful about remembering that enormous processes can begin quietly. A little salt left behind as ice forms, a little density change, a little sinking, and from that, currents that may travel across oceans. The sea often works this way, by soft accumulations and patient motions. So let your thoughts become patient too. There's no rush. You do not need to keep pace with anything tonight. You can simply listen and rest while the imagined ocean continues its long turning around you, under moonlight, under stars, under the soft authority of time. The deep currents set in motion by differences in temperature and salinity are sometimes described as part of a global conveyor, though the reality is more intricate and graceful than any belt in a factory. Still, the metaphor helps. Water formed in cold high latitudes can sink and begin journeys through the deep ocean that may take centuries to complete, while elsewhere deep waters slowly rise again, mix, and eventually return toward the surface. This thermohaline circulation, named for temperature and salt, is one of the great hidden motions of the planet. It links basins, redistributes heat, oxygenates depths, and helps connect distant seas into a single world ocean. Beneath the visible tides and waves, there is this slower, heavier breathing, a planetary circulation moving with immense patience. Nearer the surface, wind-driven currents sweep across the ocean, shaped by Earth's rotation and the contours of continents. Some carry warm water poleward, some bring cool water toward the tropics, and together they help moderate climate. Without these currents, many coastal regions would feel more extreme in temperature. The ocean stores and transports heat like a vast moving memory of the sun. This is why seas and oceans are not only places we visit, they are conditions under which whole societies and ecosystems exist. A current flowing far offshore may influence fog, rainfall, winter chill, summer softness, fisheries, and flowering seasons on land. The sea reaches inland in quiet ways. Much of the rain that falls on land begins as ocean water lifted skyward through evaporation. Under the sun's warmth, molecules escape the surface and enter the air, leaving salt behind. Carried by winds, condensed into clouds, and eventually released again, that evaporated water may return to mountains, forests, fields, and rivers before making its way back to the sea. So even the fresh water in a glass, or the rain tapping at a window, is part of a long ocean story. The water cycle is not separate from the sea. It is one of the sea's many conversations with the sky. Tonight, if there is rain where you are, you might imagine it as the ocean coming softly to visit. Coastal breezes offer another tender example of how sea and land trade energy. During the day, land often heats faster than water, so air rises over land and cooler marine air may move in to replace it, creating a sea breeze. At night, the pattern can reverse as land cools faster. This daily exchange can shape comfort, cloud formation, and the feeling of entire coastlines. Anyone who has stood by the shore in late afternoon and felt cool air arrive has experienced physics as relief. The ocean, because it changes temperature more slowly than land, becomes a moderating presence, a steadying reservoir beside more restless ground. That slower heating and cooling of water is one reason the ocean stores so much of the excess warmth entering Earth's climate system. Water can absorb a great deal of heat, and the sea has been taking in both heat and carbon dioxide for a long time. This moderating capacity has helped soften some extremes, though it also means the ocean itself changes in response. For our bedtime purposes, the soothing piece is this: the sea is not passive scenery under the weather. It is one of the main reasons weather and climate behave the way they do at all. It buffers, carries, releases, and remembers heat in ways that shape seasons and shorelines. Large ocean atmosphere patterns can also shift from year to year, influencing rainfall, winds, and temperatures over wide areas. These patterns arise from changing interactions between surface waters and the air above them. Even when we do not name them, many familiar weather anomalies on land may have roots in the sea. The oceans and atmosphere are partners in an endless dance, each nudging the other. What seems from a bedroom window like a local wind or a gray day may, in some quiet chain of cause, be connected to water far beyond the horizon. Let yourself drift with this widening sense of belonging. The sea is not elsewhere. It is involved in the air around you right now. In the animal world of the sea, some of the most enchanting facts concern disguise. Octopuses, cuttlefish, and squids can change color with astonishing speed, and some can even alter the texture of their skin, shifting from smooth to rough in ways that help them blend with rocks, sand, coral, or seaweed. Special pigment cells and reflective structures in their skin allow patterns to bloom and vanish like thought. Watching such a transformation can feel almost unreal, as though the boundary between body and background had become negotiable. Yet in the ocean, camouflage often means survival, and beauty becomes a practical art. The sea seems to whisper that adaptation can be subtle, luminous, and quick. Fish, too, often use collective behavior as a kind of protection. Schools of small fish may turn in near unison, flashing silver one moment and dark the next, confusing predators and reducing the risk to any one individual. Seen from above or from within, a school can resemble a single organism made of many bodies, folding and streaming like liquid metal in blue water. There is comfort in such coordinated motion. No fish issues commands in the way we might imagine, and yet the group moves with shared responsiveness, each individual attending to its neighbors. Sometimes the ocean's intelligence looks less like planning and more like attunement. Symbiosis, that recurring marine theme, appears again in the well-known relationship between clownfish and sea anemones. The anemone's stinging tentacles help protect the fish from many predators, while the fish may help with cleaning, nutrient cycling, and water movement around its host. The clownfish does not simply hide in the anemone. It belongs there in a specific chemical and behavioral arrangement. Nearby, cleaner wrasse and cleaner shrimp continue their small acts of service on reefs, removing parasites from larger visitors who pause, almost ceremonially, to be tended. The ocean is full of these mutual arrangements, lives braided together by need and opportunity until cooperation becomes ordinary. Some of the gentlest marine facts belong to seahorses. In these unusual fish, it is the male who carries the developing young in a brood pouch, sheltering them until they are ready to emerge. Seahorses often anchor themselves with curled tails to seagrass or coral, swaying with the water rather than fighting it. Their posture is upright, their movements deliberate, and their faces can seem almost contemplative. They are a reminder that the sea does not only produce streamlined speed. It also makes creatures that drift, hover, curl, and wait. There is more than one way to belong in current. The moon's pull, which shapes tides, also appears in the timing of some marine reproductive events. In certain reef systems, many corals release eggs and sperm into the water in synchronized spawning events, often linked to season, temperature, and lunar cycles. At the right time, under the right conditions, whole stretches of reef may release tiny buoyant bundles into the night sea, turning the water briefly into a slow, drifting constellation of potential life. It is difficult to imagine a more bedtime-worthy fact: moonlight, warm water, and a reef quietly keeping time with the sky. And in a broader sense, marine life often responds to cycles of light and dark with remarkable precision. Some animals feed at dawn or dusk, some rise at night, some spawn with the moon, some rest in crevices by day and forage by dark. The ocean is not merely a place of random motion. It is full of clocks, many of them older than our species, ticking by tide, season, temperature, and light. If your own day has felt disordered, perhaps there is comfort in remembering that much of the living world still keeps rhythm beautifully. You can simply listen and rest, while the sea continues its ancient scheduling without hurry. Let's rest here for a moment with those images of camouflage, schooling fish, seahorses swaying, and corals spawning beneath moonlight. Imagine the water is warm now, darker than day but still softly blue, and everything is moving just a little. Nothing jerks, nothing startles. Even the fish that turn together do so like silk being folded. Take a breath in. Let it be slow. Breathe out and feel your body loosen a bit more. There's no rush. You're doing great. If you've been following every word, you can ease back now. If you've drifted in and out, that's wonderful too. This journey isn't about holding on tightly. It's about floating, about trusting that one fact will lead to another the way one wave follows the last. There's nothing to do now except be here. Moonlight on water, salt in the air, the long hush of the sea stretching toward the horizon. Let yourself drift a little farther. The ocean's influence reaches all the way down to the making of shells and skeletons. Many marine organisms, from corals to mollusks to tiny plankton, build hard parts using minerals dissolved in seawater, especially calcium compounds. Over time, the remains of these organisms can accumulate as sand, sediment, chalky ooze, or limestone. Some of the white cliffs on land, some beach sands, some tropical islands, all carry histories of ancient marine life compressed or broken and rearranged by time. So when you hold a shell or walk across a bright shore, you may be stepping on architecture once made cell by cell in the sea. The ocean builds delicately, then slowly transforms what it has built. Some tropical sands are shaped in surprising ways. On coral reefs, fish such as parrotfish graze on algae growing on or within coral structures, and in the process they grind bits of hard material that may later contribute to the surrounding sand. This means that a beach can be, in part, a record of many meals, many skeletons, many generations of reef life turned to powder by mouths and waves. It is a rather tender circle when softened by time. The sea does not merely erode. It recycles beauty into new forms underfoot. At low tide, tide pools become miniature oceans left behind among rocks, each one a small world of salinity shifts, trapped fish or crabs, anemones, snails, seaweeds, and patient waiting. To kneel beside a tide pool is to see the logic of the larger sea condensed into a basin you can look into. Water moves in and out. Temperature changes. Creatures cling, shelter, filter, breathe, and hold on until the returning tide reconnects them to the whole. There is something profoundly comforting about these little temporary worlds. Even separated, they remain part of the sea's rhythm. They are pauses, not abandonments. Sometimes the sea glows at the surface too. In certain conditions, bioluminescent plankton can create shimmering blue flashes when waves break, paddles dip, or footsteps disturb wet sand. The effect can be so delicate that it seems imagined at first, like starlight dissolved in foam. Yet it is often produced by tiny organisms responding mechanically to disturbance with brief pulses of light. A wave rolls in, and its edge glitters electric blue. A hand trails through dark water, and sparks bloom around the fingers. The night ocean, usually defined by absence of light, suddenly writes itself in luminous script. It may be one of the closest things nature has to a living dream. Navigation in the sea is another quiet wonder. Seabirds, sea turtles, salmon, whales, and many other marine animals appear able to use a mix of cues that can include the sun, the stars, Earth's magnetic field, smells, water temperature, current patterns, and even the angle of waves. We are still learning how these senses combine, but the result is clear enough. Many animals move through open water with confidence that seems almost impossible from a human perspective. The ocean, which looks boundaryless to us, is full of readable information if you are built to perceive it. And then there is sleep itself in the marine world. Some marine mammals, like dolphins, are thought to rest with one half of the brain sleeping at a time, while the other remains alert enough for breathing and awareness. This unihemispheric sleep allows them to keep surfacing and stay attentive in a watery environment where complete unconsciousness would be risky. It is a fascinating reminder that even rest takes different forms in the sea. Sleep there is not always absence, but alternation, rhythm, partial drift. Perhaps that is fitting. The oceans themselves seem never fully asleep and never fully awake, always in some middle state of slow motion, dark breathing, and moon-governed calm. For all their beauty, the oceans are not only scenic or biological wonders. They are also among the planet's great stabilizers. They absorb enormous amounts of heat and carbon dioxide, moderating conditions on Earth in ways that make life more possible than it would otherwise be. This does not make them invulnerable, of course, but it does mean that the sea is constantly doing hidden work. Day after day, century after century, it receives, stores, moves, and transforms. The ocean is laboring quietly beneath the surface of our awareness, and much of that labor feels invisible precisely because it is so constant. Like breathing, it is easy to overlook until you pause and notice how essential it is. Along coasts, blue carbon ecosystems such as mangroves, salt marshes, and seagrass meadows can store carbon especially effectively in their vegetation and waterlogged soils. Because decomposition in these muddy, oxygen-poor sediments may proceed slowly, carbon can remain buried for long periods. So these tender coastal habitats are not just nurseries and wave softeners. They are memory banks in mud holding traces of atmospheres past. It is one more reason these places feel sacred in their quiet way. A marsh at dusk may not look grand, but beneath its grasses lies stored time. The ocean also reflects light in endlessly changing ways. Moonlight on calm water can form a silver road, but that road is not really a solid path. It is a pattern created by countless small ripples reflecting light toward your eyes. Move a little, and the road moves with you. The sea is full of such personal illusions, phenomena that seem to happen just for the viewer and yet are built from universal rules. Even the glitter path of the moon is a conversation between wave texture, angle, and attention. It is a lovely reminder that wonder often happens where physics meets perspective. And despite everything we have learned, much of the ocean remains only partially mapped or infrequently visited by human beings, especially in the deep. In some ways, we know the outline of the marine world better than many of its details. Vast areas of seafloor still await finer description, and many species are likely still undescribed or poorly understood. This is not a frightening mystery tonight. It is a comforting one. The world still contains room for discovery. There are still dark valleys, hidden ridges, and small luminous creatures going about their lives beyond our immediate notice. The unknown is not empty. It is simply still unfolding. There is also a deep temporal comfort in the sea. The water cycling through clouds, rivers, and basins has been moving around this planet for immense spans of time. The salt in the ocean, the minerals in shells, the carbon in seagrass mud, the currents under polar ice, the plankton turning sunlight into breath, all of it participates in cycles far older than any single human life. When you feel small beside the ocean, that smallness can be peaceful rather than lonely. It means you belong to something enduring. And perhaps the most relaxing fact of all is that the sea connects so many scales of existence without strain. The tiniest plankton and the largest whale, the nearest tide pool and the farthest trench, moonlight on a beach and deep currents crossing whole basin, your next breath and a sunlit patch of water half a world away. They are all part of one long circulating story. The ocean is not separate pieces. It is relation. It is continuity. It is the world practicing wholeness in salt and motion. Let yourself rest inside that idea now, as if floating on your back in dark, calm water, held up by something vast, ancient, and surprisingly gentle. And now, as our long ocean journey begins to slow toward its quiet ending, let's linger a little at the shoreline and look back over all the waters we have crossed together tonight. We began with the broad blue face of Earth, with tides answering the moon and waves carrying distant wind toward waiting coasts. We drifted through salt and sunlight, through the invisible labor of phytoplankton, through upwelling and breath, and the upper ocean's shimmering meadows of microscopic life. We visited coral reefs built by tiny patient animals, mangrove roots making shelter in the tide, seagrass meadows holding carbon in silence, and kelp forests swaying like green cathedrals beneath cool coastal light. We followed turtles and whales and lanternfish along routes older than memory. We listened to the ocean as an acoustic world, where songs can travel farther than seems possible, and the dark is threaded with calls. We descended through twilight and into greater depth, where pressure rises, marine snow falls, and living creatures create their own constellations out of bioluminescence. We stood beside hydrothermal vents where the planet exhales heat into black water, and where life finds energy in chemistry. We traced the mid-ocean ridges, the longest mountain chain on Earth, and peered toward trenches that fall deeper than many mountains climb. We rested in polar seas among floating ice and salt-heavy waters beginning long circulations through the deep. We felt currents carrying heat, evaporation lifting water skyward, and coastal breezes moving between land and sea. We watched octopuses vanish into pattern, schools of fish turn like silver thought, seahorses sway, corals spawn by moon-governed time, tide pools wait for the return of the sea, and night waves flicker blue with living light. If you've been awake for all of it, thank you for staying with me. And if some of it reached you only in fragments, in images, in half-dreams, that is beautiful too. This kind of listening was never meant to be grasped tightly. It was meant to drift, to wash over you, to soften the edges of the day. You're doing great. There's no rush. The ocean itself would understand that best. It does not hurry its tides. It does not force its horizons. It simply continues, patient and immense. Maybe that is why the sea can feel so reassuring at night. It is large enough to absorb our restless thoughts without being disturbed by them. You can bring the whole untidy weight of a day to the shore in your mind, and the water does not ask you to explain. It simply arrives, recedes, arrives again. It keeps time more slowly than worry. It offers scale, and with scale sometimes comes relief. Your concerns do not have to vanish to become lighter. Sometimes they just need to be held beside something older and wider than themselves. As you rest here near the end, imagine one final scene. The night is calm. The beach is empty except for you. The tide is somewhere between coming and going, that soft in-between state where the water keeps changing shape almost invisibly. Far offshore, unseen currents are moving under the surface. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a whale may be traveling. In a patch of warm shallows, seagrass is breathing quietly. In the deep, marine snow is falling. Along a ridge miles below, warm mineral water is rising through stone. At a polar edge, ice is forming in silence. Above it all, the moon hangs steady, and the ocean, faithful as ever, answers in its own slow language. And you do not need to answer anything back. You can simply listen and rest. There's nothing to do now except be here. If this journey brought you a little calm tonight, you're always welcome to return for another quiet drift through the natural world. If it feels right, you may subscribe or leave a gentle like so this sleepy corner of the night can find you again. But if not, that's all right too. The most important thing is that you feel a little more settled, a little more carried, a little closer to sleep. So let your breathing be tidal now, in and out, not forced, not measured, just natural like a shore receiving water in the dark. Let your thoughts spread out and thin like foam dissolving on wet sand. Let the muscles around your eyes soften. Let your hands rest. Let your jaw unclench. Let your shoulders drop another fraction. The night is allowed to hold you now. Thank you for spending this time beside the imagined sea with me. Thank you for wandering through salt, depth, current, moonlight, and hush. Whether you are drifting already or still hovering on the edge of sleep, I hope the ocean stays with you in the gentlest way. Not as noise, but as rhythm. Not as distance, but as connection. Not as something to conquer or even fully understand, but as something vast enough to be comforted by. And now, very softly, we can let the horizon fade. The silver road of moonlight breaks into smaller ripples. The tide hushes lower. The last wave folds over itself and disappears into the dark. The whole sea keeps breathing, and you can follow that breath down into sleep. Good night.